Hello viewers and welcome to another episode of The Phone Show. Is Samsung worried about the Galaxy S5? Well, with news that the company's next flagship handset is set to land at MWC rather than its usual standalone event, should we prepare to be underwhelmed? Well, it's the subject up for debate today, and we've also got the latest info on the Nokia X Android phone, and we'll be asking whether it's the end of the line for the Nexus range. First though, let's take a look at what else has been happening in the smartphone world this week. So the latest Samsung effort might not even be out of the gate yet, but we're already hearing about multiple variants. A new report from Korean site ET News claims to have confirmation that the Galaxy S5 Active is in the works. Meanwhile, Indian site Zauber has been spotted with a listing for a new Samsung mobile camera, codenamed SMC115. These are all unconfirmed of course, but seeing as Samsung did the same with the S4, it's not completely out of the question. Again, on the subject of the S5, Samsung is also said to be developing an in-house fingerprint sensor for the upcoming flagship. Unlike the Touch ID sensor on the iPhone 5S, Samsung's scanner works when you swipe your finger across the screen. And so far we've heard contradicting reports over whether the S5 will rock a fingerprint scanner or not. Hopefully we'll hear for sure soon enough. The MWC-bound Xperia Z2 has apparently been leaked again, this time showing off an incredibly slim bezel. The latest shot comes courtesy of Chinese forum DigiWo. It's not clear how the tipster got hold of the snaps, and their blurring nature means we're taking this one with a pinch of salt for the time being. Still, it all looks quite Sony-like, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. And finally, is Apple trying to get personal? The latest patent out of Cupertino suggests the company's looking into delivering content based on users' moods. It essentially outlines a mood scanner that figures out your emotion and responds accordingly. It seems this would work by tracking what you're doing on your phone in order to target ads you're more likely to click on. Perhaps not the best timed idea amongst all the privacy and NSA surveillance scares. And now it's over to our resident mobile experts Gareth, Beavis and McCann.
So the big surprise this week is the fact that, although it's not been confirmed, the Samsung Galaxy S5 looks very likely to appear at MWC in Barcelona later this month. I mean, it seems a really odd time to be doing something when Samsung's built so much goodwill around the fact that it's got its own standalone events, lots of really big interest. I mean, why is it going down to a trade show once again?
Well, it is a big surprise, there's no doubt about that. The S3 and the S4 garnered so much attention because they had their own standalone events. So with Samsung going down the route of throwing the S5 into a trade show with loads of other manufacturers launching all manner of devices, there is the real possibility that it will get lost a bit, but I'm thinking maybe that's exactly what Samsung wants. Maybe the S5 isn't going to be as inspirational, next generation as people are possibly hoping. Maybe it's going to be more of an iteration on the S4. You know, small tweaks here and there in design and interface, but nothing to really blow us away. So maybe it is scared of the backlash possibly from everyone going, oh, well, this is an underwhelming device.
But don't you think that's a bit worrying for Samsung? I mean, with the S4, we sort of gave it a one-off because, you know, the Galaxy S3 was so big. What needed to be changed? You know, Apple does the 5S, that kind of iterative version forwards. But the S5 really needs to be a big phone. You know, we were hoping for things like a metal chassis and like the world's greatest screen. And I'm really worried if that doesn't appear, that Samsung's going to start losing momentum. I mean, is that what you're worried about as well?
Yeah, I think that is the issue. You know, has Samsung sort of reached the point where there's nothing really left to properly reinvent? Yes, the screen's going to be a higher resolution, but that's not really going to amaze us anymore. We've got full HD displays now on our smartphones, and they're excellent. And while a high resolution display we'll never say no to, it's not really going to blow us away as much. Rumours of a 16 megapixel camera, now that's nothing these days. The Xperia Z1 has 20.7 megapixels, the Lumia 1020 41 megapixels. So the camera again is going to be good. It's not going to blow us away. Fingerprint scanner, yep, always fun, but it's been beaten to the punch by Apple and HTC. So what is there left for Samsung really to bring to the table, which is new and we haven't seen before, and is actually going to amaze us?
Yeah, and I think the fact it's going to be MWC, it's going to be competing with the likes of, you know, Sony's going to probably bring quite an interesting device out there. A number of manufacturers like LG is going to put some really innovative tech probably on the market. You know, HTC, I think, sidestepped the whole thing, which is going to be great for that brand because it will be away from all this big melee. And we're going to see the new Nokia Android phone, which I think could be really exciting. I mean, it's going to be low end, which I think is probably to do with Microsoft's purchase of the Lumia brand. So it's probably pushed into different markets. But I'm really excited to see a Nokia Android phone, to see what that actually can bring.
Definitely. I mean, from all the rumours that we're seeing, it's definitely going to be targeted at the bottom end of the market. It's going to be an entry-level device, possibly one to sort of make a splash in the developing markets, where Nokia already has a very strong base anyway, and bringing that sort of extra Android functionality and what looks like a heavily skinned version of the operating system to those sort of markets can only really benefit building on the Asha brand, which is built up, and then offering customers more. You can see that working really well for Nokia because it's already got its niche there. Breaking into the sort of wider Android market may be more difficult, challenging the likes of the Samsungs and the HTCs and the Sonys. I think it's going to struggle a little bit more because we've come to expect the very best of Android from that, and it's not clear if Nokia can deliver that.
I think there's still a lot of appetite though for Nokia doing an Android phone. I mean, I know 3 years ago when there was this talk about what Windows Phone was going to be for Nokia, a lot of people said, let's just make sure they just go Android. Let's just get some really interesting stuff that Nokia brings, on the camera side, on the mapping, and bring that into the Android space and really help improve that. And I think while it is probably a bit too late for that, there's a lot of room still for Nokia to go in there and innovate and change things. And people, yeah, they're aware of Android, but I don't think they really necessarily are so wedded to the operating system in certain forms. I think if Nokia comes over with a really interesting skinned version of Android, the budget market will definitely help. It being cheap will always be a good sell. And whether or not it's because of the Microsoft purchase that they can't do a really high-end version, I don't know. But I think there's definitely room to progress still, even though it may not be a big hitter initially. In 2 or 3 years, I think Nokia's definitely got some chances, and especially if it can start to court Google a little better and make that into a more of a promising partnership.
Sure, I mean, and talking about Google, there's also talk around the whole Nexus brand, or possibly no more Nexus, with maybe Play Editions taking the fore. What do you reckon about that?
I'd be really worried if Google got rid of the Nexus brand for a number of reasons. One, it's good hardware at a really low price, which is what people really like. I mean, people love cheap stuff. And if it's a decent quality, which is what the Nexus brand has always stood for, then that's going to be a real loss to the market. Also, the other problem there is that Google has the Nexus brand simply because it wants to show off the best of what Android is. And if it's basically saying now, look, we don't need a flagship device to do that, then that's saying that we think Android is good enough, which I really don't think it is, because it's still so fragmented. It needs to get to the point where it's at least half as quick as Apple at the uptake of a new operating system. And right now it's months away. It takes ages to see each thing rolling out, and that leads to a disparity in features. And I think going forward, that's probably going to change. I mean, KitKat seems to have been a real seismic shift in allowing your devices to update more quickly. But we're not at the end of that yet. We need to see the Nexus brand survive for at least 2 or 3 more iterations, especially in the tablet space, where it's actually got quite a good following because the Nexus 7 is so popular. But the problem for me is, without a hardware side of things, what's Google going to do to help bring the Nexus brand forward? I mean, it's always had different partners and different ways of going forward, but now it's sold Motorola to Lenovo. Is that going to change things, do you think?
Well, I mean, there's talks about Google doing deals with manufacturers left, right and centre. It's just signed a large agreement with Samsung, and all the ins and outs of that haven't been completely revealed, but maybe there's something in that which commits to a Play Edition from Samsung. I mean, obviously we've also seen HTC do a Play Edition and LG on the G-Pad 8.3, so there are already big manufacturers doing the Play Edition, so maybe Google's had a word, they've signed some sort of deals, and it's put into place those sort of assurances, so when the Nexus brand if it does die, then it's already got the backup from the key manufacturers at least to push the pure Android experience forward.
The only problem with that is that one of the great things about Nexus devices is they're so cheap. Play Editions, are only available in the US and some other limited markets, and not in the UK. And they are very expensive. You're talking at least twice the cost of a Nexus when the hardware is largely similar. So I think that's something that really needs to be looked at. If they are signing these agreements, then they need to make the Play Editions cheaper. If you do that, then you're calling into question why, their own variants, why the Galaxy S4 is more expensive, whatever, or the Galaxy S5. So that's going to be a difficult one to manage. And as I said, I hope that the Nexus brand sticks around for a little bit longer. Now, talking about Motorola, I think the fact it's being sold to Lenovo is a massive surprise, because it's only 18 months since Google took over properly at Motorola, and B, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens to that brand. Part of me worries that Motorola doesn't have the chance of surviving now. Well,
I can't say I was personally hugely surprised that Google unloaded Motorola. I mean, surely the biggest point of that purchase was the patents, and it's got those locked away. It hasn't lost those, it's kept those, and it's got rid of the rest of the business. I mean, Google have always said they're not in the hardware game really for the long term.
I really hope it keeps the DNA of what's been started now. I mean, the Moto G is a great phone at a low price. The Moto X is, it's got some good ideas, and I was really looking forward to seeing what the sequel of that would have been. And so, yeah, it's good that Motorola is going to be kept as a brand by Lenovo. But what I don't want is just to see it becoming, a way in for Lenovo to hit these markets, because, yeah, the stuff it's doing right now is really good. And while I'd like to see a Motorola phablet, I mean, that's what Lenovo has been doing quite well over in China. It's a really big manufacturer over there, and it wants to push into these new markets, understandably. But it'd be great to see it fusing that together and just making sure that it keeps the heritage of what Motorola, one of the great brands in the smartphone or mobile phone industry, and just keeping the heritage of that and making sure it works really well. So I think, the fact Google has sold Motorola this early on, to me, is a surprise, but it shows that things are moving along quickly, and I'm just excited to see what happens next.
Before we wrap things up, let's take a quick look at some of the stuff happening over at TechRadar.com that you might have missed. Details of the first BlackBerry phone from iPhone manufacturers Foxconn show up online. Things appear rocky for Tizen as networks look unwilling to scoop up handsets. And Apple is reported to have finished with the iOS 7.1 beta. Find out when you can get your hands on it. Well, that's all for this week, folks, so thanks for watching. Remember to leave us your thoughts in the comments below, and for all your smartphone needs, be sure to subscribe to TechRadar.com.